going to talk a little bit about fear, and I got to tell you right now, I'm terrified, so bear with me. Public speaking is easy for about 3 people. I'm not one of them, but tend to get over it. Good morning, church. How are we doing? Good, good. If you ask most people what Lent is all about, the response you'll most often get is, it's about giving up something, right? We give up something we love to usually eat, right? We give up chocolate, or we give up sodas, or potato chips, or Danny's case, what, avocado pits? Is that what it is? Yeah. Self-sacrificing guy that he is. But you know, that's fair. There's fasting involved in Lent, but fasting itself is not all about the challenge or the punishment of giving up something you like. Fasting is a way to remove some of those barriers that get between us and God. Fasting is a way where we can set aside those things that drive our desires for just a little bit so we can stop and spend time in the presence of God, right? So it's not all about the challenge, although it helps. So this Lent season, we've been talking about ways that we can intentionally stop and step away from the busyness, the hurriedness, all the noise of our lives, so we can stop and spend time in the presence of God. So at first, we introduced this, the prayer chair. Everyone has one in their home by now, yes? Just lie to me. Yes? There you go. Good job. So this prayer chair we have placed in our home in a place where it is conspicuous, where we can't avoid seeing it, stubbing our toe on it, whatever it is that it takes for us to stop and recognize that, hey, I have not spent time in that chair today. I have not spent time with God today. So everybody's doing that, right? Good answer, good answer. But then things started to come up. Things start rattling around in our head, and they distract us from being able to spend time and recognize and be in the presence of God, right? The first one we had to address were our worries. So, we got one of these. Maybe not as fancy, maybe fancier, who knows. This is our worry box. So what we can do with that is that worry that's distracting us from being in the presence of God, we can write it down. We can give it to God. We can say, hey, take this from me so I can be with you. We place it in that worry box. We close it up. So when we sit in our chair and we see that worry box, we're reminded that those things that we worry about, they're no longer ours. They belong to God now. So we can get on with our time with God. So that works for a little bit, but wait, there's more. Then those resentments creep up. Those unresolved grievances that we carry with us. Those things we regret not doing. The things we regret doing. The things we regret about people doing to us or for us. So we have to take those. And we got this urn. Something like this. Or perhaps a fire pit that we could take that resentment and we could write it down. And we can take it and place it in the flame of God's consuming fire and be released of that resentment. So that now we've taken care of worry. We've taken care of resentment. Now, finally, we can sit in our chair and be at peace with God, but no. Those broken relationships come to mind. Those relationships that just elude our efforts to reconcile. The people that we need to forgive, or the people that we need to go and receive forgiveness from. Our unforgiveness gets in the way. So what do? Of course, we bake cookies. We bake forgiveness cookies. And these cookies we can take to that person. I picked on you first service. Yes, you did. And we say, here, I need your forgiveness. And these forgiveness, she won't even take them. I mean, come on. How damaged of a relationship is that? We'll work on it later, Clara. But these forgiveness cookies are a symbol of the effort that we are going to in order to reconcile these broken relationships, because relationships are very, very important in our life. So finally, we've taken care of worry. We've taken care of resentments. We've taken care of our inability to forgive. Nothing's left. Now we can sit in peace with God in our prayer chair and just enjoy hearing that still small voice. But no. There's one more. And this one is tough. This one is the hardest, most persistent, and most damaging thing that rattles around in our head, in our lives. Rattles around in our head when we're trying to sit in the chair and be in the presence of God. It's our unwarranted fear. See, there are two types of fear. One that can be life-giving, life-saving, and there's another type. The type of fear that can be life-taking, that can be damaging to our very beings. From the moment when that apple core hit the floor of the Garden of Eden, we have known unwarranted fear. Our scriptures are filled with stories of God's people dealing with this kind of fear. Sometimes they deal with it very well, quite often very, very poorly. Yet through it all is God's voice, God's unwavering promise. Do not be afraid, for I am with you. But here we are, still a people consumed with unwarranted fear, so consumed with it that even when we try to sit and be with God, it distracts us. Jesus knew of this. He knew of our tendency to be distracted, to be subjugated to the unwarranted fears that we build in our own minds. He knows that there are these two types of fears, and he knows how we can deal with them. In our reading today from the Gospel of Luke, we hear his clear instruction on how to avoid the second, the life-taking, unnecessary, unwarranted fear. So hear these words. And do not keep striving for what you are to eat and what you are to drink. And do not keep worrying. For it is the nations of the world that strive after all these things. And your Father knows that you need them. Instead, strive for his kingdom, and these things will be given to you as well. Do not be afraid, little flock, for it is your Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. Sell your possessions, give alms, make purses for yourselves that do not wear out, an unfailing treasure in heaven, where no thief comes near and no moth destroys. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. One of the things that we must tend to in order to survive is our body, right? Our bodies, however tough we think we might be, are really actually very vulnerable and needy. We have to constantly put food and water and nourishment into our bodies to keep them healthy. We have to protect our bodies from the weather, from the elements, with clothing and shelter. We have to allow our bodies time to heal from illness and injury. It's all just a matter of survival, right? But some bodies can be more vulnerable than others, like this one. See this little baby human? This is a very needy human, a very vulnerable body. And nothing strikes fear like holding one of these in your arms. This is young Penelope Laurice Ashford. Proud Grammy right here. Proud grandfather right here. We haven't kept it a secret for 3 months. She's only a week old in this picture. Yeah, it's a rather well-developed baby. In the next photo, proud mother and father, Robert and his wife, Ariel. And they look happy here, don't they? Like everything's great, right? Any parents in this room? You all know that behind those eyes is nothing but terror. My God, what have we done? I am responsible for this little human for the rest of its life. Wow. Glad I'm through that. Thank you very much. But you see, our bodies aren't the only thing that we need to keep healthy in order to survive, right? Just as importantly, but even more so, we must tend to love. We have been created to be in loving relationships. Our scripture tells us that all the way back to the Garden of Eden, the very beginnings of creation, God looked down on that first human and said, "It is not good for it to be alone." So God created another, a partner to share in the beauty of God's creation. So it's in our very DNA to be in loving relationships with each other. When asked about the greatest commandment, Jesus didn't respond, "Go out, earn as much as you can, get as much as you can, and hoard it all." Anybody think? No. No. What did he say? He said, love God, love your neighbor, love yourself. Nothing but love and relationships, right? Love God, love neighbor, love self. We simply cannot live a flourishing life without love. And love and our love for each other is what drives us to respond when dangers threaten not only ourselves, but the ones that we do love. So when something threatens our well-being or the well-being of one we love, the primal instinct of fear kicks in. We've all experienced it, right? We've been startled, we've been scared. We've gained that burst of energy that comes as our body dumps a load of adrenaline into our system, right? We get this strength. We get this focus of physical and mental capacities that are zoned in on that immediate danger. We've all heard the stories of people who have done extraordinary things, lifting cars off of other people. That burst of energy that comes from fear and its response to danger can save a life. But the second kind of fear is much less helpful. Instead of saving a life, it can take it. This is a fear that does not come from immediate danger, but one that is grown in our own thoughts and worries. In our reading today, Jesus said, "Do not keep worrying." To be clear, we have to take notice not just what Jesus said, but also what he did not say. Jesus said, don't be concerned about your earthly needs. Jesus didn't say, just sit there and wait for food and water to fall from heaven. No. Jesus understands that we have earthly needs that we must tend to. We should be concerned about these things. We should make effort to go out and get food, get shelter for ourselves, for the ones that we love. But what he does say is that we should not continue to strive for these things. So here, Jesus is not telling us what we should do with these fears that we created. He's trying to help us understand how to not create them in the first place. So here's how we grow unnecessary fears. So we begin with legitimate concern for our earthly needs. And that's okay. But when we keep striving for these things, even though we have enough, when we don't trust that God will continue to provide, and our concern becomes worry. From worry, all it takes is for us to toss in a few what ifs. what if this happens? What if this doesn't happen? And pretty soon we're well on our way to anxiety, where our concern has gone from, hey, I need to make sure I have food, to, oh no, I may not be able to get food, to, I'll never have food again. And pretty soon we throw in a couple of what ifs, and all of a sudden we're going to starve to death today. It becomes a full-blown fear, and we don't know what to do with it. Because we know we need certain things. We need food, we need water, we need shelter, we need love. And it's good to tend to these needs. But the problem arises that when we convince ourselves that we either will not be able to get what we need, that what we have is not enough, or we're going to lose what we already have. And that's when unnecessary, unwarranted fear kicks in. And just like real fear, we get that boost of adrenaline, that boost of energy that comes from that adrenaline. But in these circumstances, there is no need for fight or flight. There's no car to lift off of that person. So this energy just builds up within us until eventually it explodes out of us in a fit of rage or anger, distrust, even hatred. Our fear turns from a useful emotion into a very destructive one. And it causes us to react in terrible ways. We may crucify our relationships by working just a little bit more so we can get just a little bit more. Or worse yet, we imagine that there's not enough to go around. So we crucify our neighbor before he can get to what is there before we can. The destructive force of our unwarranted fear can be devastating. I came across a short video that illustrates just what fear can do. As we watch it, notice some things. Notice how fearful the characters are. See how their fear consumes them to the point that their entire focus is shifted to getting what they need. They have no concern for the others around them. In fact, they begin to see each other as threats to their own survival. Frustration, and then anger. Do you notice that one of the characters, they managed to get a little bit of the food on their spoon, but the other sees it and strikes out in anger, breaking the other's spoon? This is the fear that kills. So let's watch it again, but this time we'll watch it all the way through. And this time, let's see what can happen if even one person managed to realize that the fear that they have is unwarranted, that their fear is not based in immediate danger, but in their what-ifs. It's been construed in their minds. So let's see what happens. A much different ending than what we could imagine if we remain in fear. See, Jesus reminds us of what God has told us all along. Don't be afraid, little flock, for it is your Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. When we let go of our unwarranted, unnecessary fears, solutions become apparent. And we discover that God is faithful to God's promises, that there is enough. As we saw in this video, everyone was so focused on their need, their fear that they were not going to be able to fulfill their need, that they couldn't see the possibility that lied right in front of them, that by working together and sharing with each other in a loving relationship, that they all could have what they needed. Fear had blinded them to the possibilities. So the fear of not having enough, of not getting enough, can distract us from being the people that God has created us to be. When we experience unwarranted fear, we become angry, resentful, distrustful, harmful. We can lash out at others who don't deserve it. Each week we come to this table, the Lord's table. We share in a meal. It's a meal of remembrance, where we think about that night when Jesus was betrayed by one of his own. And after that meal, after what we observe every week, we're going to observe in the coming couple of weeks. We're going to talk about, we're going to relive the experience of Palm Sunday, that triumphal entrance into Jerusalem for the last week of Jesus' life. Monday, Thursday, we're going to remember that experience of that Last Supper and that night when Jesus was betrayed. Good Friday, we're going to remember the trial and the crucifixion of Jesus on a cross, much like this one. We have to go through these things. We have to understand all of this for the beautiful sunrise of Easter morning to make sense. Because we have to recognize that God loved us so much that God put on flesh and came to live with us and be with us and teach us what it is to love. And yet our fear would not accept those teachings. Our fear placed love on a cross. We could not accept the good news that had come to us. So how often do we live that way today? How often do we let our fears control who we are, how we respond to the world around us? I'll answer for you. Way, way too often. We know the miracle of the cross. We know the resurrection. But we also know that we carry fears within us. So in your seats are envelopes. And in your envelope, you should have a pencil and a card. And in a minute, James and Mac are going to sing for us. And as they sing, I would like you to sit and think about, what fears do you carry with you that are unwarranted? What are you afraid of that you really don't need to be afraid of? One way to get at what those fears might be is think about, who is it that I distrust? Who is it that I am angry with? If we look at those, we might find that behind that distrust or behind that anger is the fear that that person or those people or that thing might take away something that I need. Or that person or those people or that thing might prevent me from getting something that I need. That's the fear behind those feelings. So think about that fear. Is it real? What I'd like you to do is when you think about that fear, write it down on that slip of paper that's in that envelope. And after you've thought about it, after you've prayed about it, I would like you to come forward and bring it to this cross. And you can see it's already covered with fears of others, because you are not alone. We all carry fear, but we don't need to. Because when you come forward in preparation to share in this meal, I would like you to bring your fear. And instead of crucifying the innocent on this cross, we will crucify our fears. We will leave them there so we can approach Christ's table without fear and be the people that God has created us to be. Let us pray. Good and loving God, we come here this morning to be in your presence. We come to you carrying all the baggage that we always carry. We try to lay down our worry. We lay down our resentment. We lay down our unforgiveness. Today, we lay down our fears. Help us to stand straight, knowing that you are with us, that we have no reason to fear. That in your goodness, in your faithfulness, there has been and always will be plenty. We do not need to crucify each other. We do not need to crucify ourselves. We do not need to crucify your love. Help us to enjoy it without fear as your people. Be with us, we pray. Amen.
When he told you you're not good enough,